Here we go. So I want to talk about some weight cutting and weight making strategies for weightlifting and perhaps whatever sport you might apply this to. But first, I got to say that we're going to be covering some very basic to very advanced and extreme sort of, you could almost say questionable approaches here. But when I say questionable, you got to realize that this is something I've done myself several times, many times. Many athletes have done this many times, hundreds of thousands of times. But there's always those cases where this can be dangerous and not worth it, and you got to really consider that. It is, the further you go and the more you dry yourself out here, the more miserable it gets and the more dangerous it can get. So you got to really consider that and talk to your doctor. I'm not kidding. You know, talk to the proper health priority you have in your life, and really make sure you're cleared. And please, this is for entertainment purposes only. So use this information with respect and help it perhaps guide you to the safest, smartest decision in your weight cut so you don't have to do anything drastic. Now, the thing about weightlifting that's actually very nice is that there's a 2-hour weigh-in from your weigh-in to when you actually compete. Now, where these drastic, unsafe weight cuts are happening are when you're having 24 hours outside of your competition to really go crazy, and you can take your weight loss of upwards of 20 pounds of simply fluid even, and then perhaps do an IV or whatever you need to do to get yourself rebounded, and just, you know, you don't even need that when you have 24 hours. So you can take that to very extreme far lengths in that aspect. So that's more what you see in powerlifting and fighting and things like that. But in weightlifting, thankfully we have a 2-hour weigh-in, so it prevents extreme cuts like that. But of course I've tried them and failed, and I've had many successes more seamlessly with a lot of these approaches. And really, this should not be a stressful, draining process. The goal of this should not be to have to cut yourself to smithereens in order to do so. So you got to really have an appropriate goal and target in mind first. And you want to practice this stuff and say a local meet or something like that before you really do it at a national meet, and you risk so much. That's just my small advice there. But make sure you got some guidance with this. It's a psychologically taxing process. But really, you know, you just got to be smart and rational in this. And really, if you follow these basic steps here, you should never really need to see the extreme stuff. So of course, when you have a weight that you want to get to, I would always recommend that you do this over a long period of time, and you do small body weight and body composition type changes, and you're not trying to cut all this crazy water weight at the end. Now, you should do basic things like, okay, let's say you're 100 kilograms and you want to make it down to 85 kilograms or something. You know, it's not reasonable to think that you're going to do that in 30 days. You need to give yourself much more time, say, you know, 3 to 6 months or more even. And the longer the better. The more gradual the better, and the least likely it's going to suffer your performance in your gains in the gym and trying to become stronger, more powerful, and good at the lifts. So you want to do, that's really the answer, and you can disregard the rest of this video if you can get step 1 and this golden rule down of you want to do this gradually and subtly. And that can be any combination of things in terms of dietary management, cleaning up your diet, eating a proper, healthy, clean diet, getting your proper calorie control in place, those sorts of things. I'm not going to actually spend a lot of time on that now in this video here, but that is really the answer here. And whether that means you're over-consuming calories or the wrong quality or type of calories, that's really something you need to do first and foremost, and no quick-ditch effort to cut weight at the end. Then I don't even think you really deserve it at that point. So you got to start this process several months to weeks out to really clean up your diet and get yourself ready for this weight cut, and make sure your body weight, your training weight, is not that far off from your actual competition weight. Yes, it's very common that lifters will train several kilos over, you know, anywhere from 1 to upwards of 5 on the high end, sort of kilos above their competition weight. I wouldn't really get too comfortable with that, but it happens. But you're just going to have to cut yourself down as you get ready for competition. It's only going to make you weaker when you actually compete, so it's going to skew things. So the tighter you can stay there, the better, and that's what I prefer myself. I used to do crazy cuts upwards of 15 to 20 pounds for some competitions, and that was really the wrong way of doing things. It was a fun experiment. I learned a lot, but it's no way by any means to hit your best performance with a 2-hour weigh-in. So you get your ducks in a row early, and you lose that weight early on, and perhaps you find that you have no trouble making weight, and perhaps you're only a pound or a kilo over the week of the meet, and you're going to be smooth sailing as we go through these next steps. But that's step 1, is getting your general body weight as close to your actual competition weight as possible. So you're cleaning yourself up as you go. Now, as you get closer and closer to the competition, let's say you're going to have to cut some water weight, and there's only so far you can go with your body composition. And of course, there's an appropriate body fat percentage for each weight class that's going to yield the best performance. And one simple way to look at that is look at the world champions and the top international weightlifters and their body fat percentage levels, and compare yourself to them in terms of what that actually looks like. If you're a heavyweight, you want to be big. You know, if you're a lightweight or a middle weight competitor, that fat mass is not, of course, bigger masses can move greater loads, but the sport is not exactly about that. It's how much can that mass move. And you look at the Chinese and all those guys, they're shredded, they're ripped. Lou is completely shredded, six-pack, you name it, and he's not wasting any mass in his body with fat points, basically. So consider that, and that's not something you're going to do by just simply water weight manipulation at the end for competition. So as you're getting closer and closer, one thing you want to get in a habit of weighing yourself, and this, you got to have data here to guide yourself through this process. You want to take notes as you go, or you're going to go mentally insane as you get through the last hardest steps of this. So you're going to take your notes, and the most important notes here, you're going to take an AM and PM weight weigh-in. So every day when you wake up, you're going to go to the bathroom. You're not going to eat anything or drink anything first. You're going to weigh yourself after going to the bathroom and completely naked, and so you're going to have any variables messing up your weight. So every day it's after going to the bathroom, number one and number two, not drinking anything, not eating anything, and naked. And that way you've got a consistent, reliable measure each and every day using the same scale, and maybe get a new scale to make sure it's accurate, test it with a weight or something. And so you're going to use the same scale morning and night, and then at night, just before bed, you're simply going to weigh yourself as well. And what you're going to see there is trends that take place over time. You want to do this as early on in the process as possible. If you're the type that's going to be OCD and obsessive about this, then I don't encourage that. Maybe just do a weekly weigh-in. But if you're healthy about this and you can handle looking at the scale on a daily basis, then go for it. It's a nice way to track everything, just like we track our numbers in weightlifting and sets and reps and numbers and things like that. So it also lets you know how you're responding to training, and sometimes it's a good indicator that, hey, you're withering away, maybe you're overtraining a bit, or overreaching a bit, or undereating, or something like that. But if your goal is weight loss here in weightlifting, your trend should be you're losing body fat / perhaps pounds on the scale, but you want to get your body fat percentage, which would be ideal to help you really measure that. But then your numbers and your performance are not dropping down, and if it would be nice if they could still go up. We just had Ashley from Team Lab just did an amazing job cutting weight and getting stronger at the same time. She lost an incredible amount of weight. Her body fat percentage went way down. Her lean mass went way up. She lost scale weight, and her numbers went astronomically high at the same time. So that's a perfect scenario. I can't say that that's going to happen too often at all, actually. So if you can balance that out, then great. You're doing a great job, and you're being very meticulous. So you're tracking your nutrition, you're tracking your body fat percentage points to see where your lean mass and fat mass is going, and you're watching your AM and PM weights and fluctuations from morning and night. You're going to see a weight drop each night, and some people average anywhere from 1 to 2+ pounds of loss per night as they sleep by morning time. And you want to know that trend, especially as you get closer to the competition. That number is going to get smaller and smaller the more you dry yourself out and you begin to lose water. So that's something you want to follow along there, especially at the end, to know how much you can rely on losing the night before the competition going into game day. So you have that data, and you can kind of see your trends. And you will also notice, let's say from Monday through Friday throughout the week, Monday is going to be your worst weight, and Friday will typically be your best weight. So you're going to be the lightest on each Friday morning, considering you followed the plan very well. Usually the weekend just throws off your rhythm. You eat other foods sometimes. Your stress cycles are different. Your cortisol cycles are different. Your sleep cycles are different. This will affect water retention. So that's going to change your morning weights on Monday, and usually they're not going to be as good. Usually Friday, after several days of training and getting on a consistent rhythm and cycle, consistent sleep cycles, you're actually going to end up being a bit lighter on Friday morning. So you watch these trends, learn about your trends and how they occur. So as you get closer to the competition, you want to really start getting tighter and tighter and realize how much is an appropriate amount for you to cut. So let's say we have a goal weight the week before the competition of what you want to be at, say that Monday, of what is reasonable for you to cut. Like I said, I cut like 19, 17 something pounds on a Monday through a Saturday one time, and I made it, but my performance was terrible. And it's possible, but you don't want to go to that extreme. Nowadays, I don't want to cut more than 5 pounds a week of a meat if I don't have to. So I want to make that as stress-free as possible, and I would even recommend doing less of that if you can. So let's say you come into that Monday of the competition at a certain weight. You want to know what that goal is and be there as close as possible, or you need to have plan B ready of whether you're not even going to go for it anymore and put yourself through the hell that's to occur. So hopefully you've done everything right and you're on track to make weight, and you don't have to take the next steps, because we're going to be looking at some water weight manipulation and then some sauna usage and say hot shower usage the last several hours to days getting ready for the competition. So all the basic stuffs have been covered. Some cases, let's say backing up a little bit, if you got some body composition changes you might want to make. Now the goal here is to not do a lot of extra work in order to exhaust your legs and your recovery reserves for your training. So if you don't have to do any extra, say, conditioning work or exercise, then that's ideal. But if you got a certain amount of body mass you're trying to get off and accentuate this process, you can do so, but I would recommend doing low intensity activities that might take longer in duration. So walking, brisk walking, biking, things of that nature, that's going to be low stress on the legs that will preferentially burn body fat for energy usage, but not exhaust your legs like hit sprinting and stuff like that. We love doing sprint training and hit type work with our fat loss clients, but for the weightlifter, if not well placed and programmed, it's going to be more exhausting and detrimental to their training efforts, and can overtrain you and push you and be the wrong training stress that we're after. So consider that in your earlier phases of weight loss. But going back to getting close to the day of, now some general stuff we're going to do to get water. Let's say this is for the person who might be 3 pounds or above their weight going into the week of, and say for females or someone who's not losing much from PM to AM weigh-ins, and they want to get a little bit tighter to their weigh-in just to sleep better at night about their weight. But if someone's only 1 to 2 pounds over their body weight, I wouldn't go to these measures in the last week, and I'd really just try to tighten up your diet the last few days, and watch fluids the last 24 hours, watch salt intake the last 24 to 48 hours, and then see how you do perhaps 2 days out. Restrict some of your foods, and of course you want to eat a high fiber diet so you make sure you're consistent and regular, but you got to think of the mass and residue that's in your intestines the night before, the 2 days before, say you weigh in. You don't want to have a lot of fecal matter inside of your intestines weighing you down and holding water and fluid. You want to make sure you're clean. Not saying you need necessarily a fiber supplement or anything like that, but eat your regular salads and foods the days before, but the day or leading up to, but the day or two before, you will kind of want to watch how much of that you're taking in, so it's not just sitting in your stomach. So insoluble fibers would be a good way to go there, that are going to push through the digestive system. Soluble ones that might take longer to digest, you just want to make sure that they're going to push through and they clear before you go weigh in. Otherwise, you're going to be holding up in water and fecal matter that's going to just make you way heavier. So consider that. But if you do all those basic tidying up steps beforehand, you shouldn't have to go to these next steps. But if you're above, say, 3 pounds or so, 5 pounds or so, going into that Monday, here's kind of the plan of action. So here's our more extreme methods. So Monday, Tuesday, roughly, so we're looking at 96 to 128 hours out from your weigh-in. And so this all is from ground zero at your weigh-in time. You're going to take roughly 2 to 3 plus gallons of water depending on your size. So if you're a smaller person, 150 pounds or less, 2 gallons of water will do. If you're larger, 200 pounds plus, 250 plus, you're looking at more like 3 gallons of water. You're trying to increase your fluid intake. Now, don't, sure you can die from excessive water intake, but it's usually marathon runners who are weekend warrior types that go and run, and they're in hot, sweaty environments, and they're not used to that training, and then they try to overcompensate with a bunch of fluid. They get encephalopathy, their brain swells, and they can die from that. This is much different. So you should be drinking lots of fluids anyway, but the goal here is, don't feel like you got to kill yourself drinking these 2+ gallons. It's to get your diuretic hormone up to get yourself to urinate more frequently. So you're pushing fluids hard for these 2 to 3 days. So Monday, Tuesday / Wednesday, depending on where your body weight's at, and when you need to start your water restriction process. So this first 2 to 3 days, you're going to be pushing 2 to 3 gallons there, getting your diuretic hormone up, and you're going to be urinating very frequently. So every hour of the day, sometimes twice, and at night. So that's the only problem with that, is that you're going to be up in the middle of the night going to the bathroom. You're going to push this process hard to get your system to urinate as much as possible as you go. So the last 2 to 3 days, so basically Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and going into Saturday's weigh-in, just depends on when your weigh-in is, whether Friday, Saturday, Sunday is why you'd fluctuate these days a bit. But you would be restricting fluids, but your diuretic hormone's still up, and you're going to get off as much water as possible through the last few days there. So let's say you restrict, you do 2+ gallons on Monday, Tuesday, and you start your restriction on Wednesday. So roughly 72 hours out, you would do just a gradual decrease and go down to 1 gallon of water. So you're going to start that restriction process, but you're not going to dehydrate yourself, because this is a very miserable process in these last 24 to 48 hours, and my least favorite part of this whole process. So at that point, 72 hours out, you would restrict to about 1 gallon. 48 hours out, depending again on where you're at, you're watching your trends, remember, of your AM and PM weigh-ins. And you're going to see some crazy stuff probably at first there on your AM and PM weigh-ins when you add all that extra fluid. But say Wednesday, Thursday, you should start to normalize and see some better numbers. So Wednesday was that 1 gallon or less, and then Thursday is a half gallon, roughly a half gallon to, if you're doing well, as high as 1 gallon on Thursday, but typically a half gallon or less on Thursday. But you're basically 24 to 48 hours in that time frame. Now, the critical time is your 0 to 24 hours out from your weigh-in. And you're going to either have 0 fluid to sips, to where you might be sipping and spitting out, or you might be sipping just a little bit at a time as you go, just to get you through dry mouths, things of that nature. I chew on ice, I suck on ice and spit it out, things like that. Some people like to use hard candy and suck on that just to keep their mouth wet and moist. But depending on where you're at and what your trend has been from PM to AM weigh-ins is how much fluid you really have there. So you want to just realize, okay, I'm 1 pound over. Well, that's about 16 ounces, and you got to do the math there and see what the food is that you're going to weigh in, want to eat, and what your water weight is. So you'll have to kind of pick and choose. Typically, I tend to go dry and not have the water, and prefer to eat the foods. And I'll use things like unsalted nuts and things like that that are high in potassium, low in salt in those last few days to keep energy up, keep my calories up. But it's a bit easier of a food to eat than, say, meats and things like that, or foods that are going to make you thirsty, like starches and breads and things of that nature. So keeps your energy level up, doesn't retain water as long as you get unsalted. Plus, we'll talk about salt restriction and potassium changes and water retention here in a second. But so again, to review, so on Wednesday, 72 hours out was about 1 gallon that you restricted from doing 2+ gallons the 2 days before that. Thursday, you're down, so you're within hours, 24 to 48 hours, you're going a half gallon to a gallon. And then the last 24 hours, it's 0 to a half gallon of water, depending on where your weight is, and 0 if you're not doing well, or sips and sip and spit it out basically, and whatever hard candy you need to get through that. So there's that structure, and that's why you want to take notes to see how you're doing and where your body weight is. If you're doing very well those 24 hours out, then I recommend taking the sips if you can get away with it. If you've been losing 2 pounds a night still through those last few days, then you can expect, hey, I can drink some water and I've got about 2 pounds to play with, that I wouldn't be too scared to do that at that point. 24 hours without fluid is hell, and that's my least favorite part. I'd rather sit in the damn sauna. And that might be something you might do just to get a drink of water at that point in time. So potassium and salt will be the next topic here. And in that water push phase, in those first 2 days, you don't need to necessarily salt restrict at that point in time. It's not a big deal. Of course, in your diet cleanup, you should have restricted extraneous uses of salt anyway, and should have a pretty much healthy cleaned up diet. As an athlete, you're using more salt than the average person anyway. Roughly 24 milligrams is the typical recommendation, but as an athlete, you're using much more than that. So a lot of the clean diets I see in weightlifters these days, they're actually getting less salt than that, so it's usually not a concern. But the time frame to be concerned is those last 48 hours there is where you definitely want to cut that salt, even up to 72 hours. You want to cut that salt and see any sources of salt in your food, and you get that to drop down so you're not retaining that water. So you might be surprised where you might find it. In meats, everything, there's going to be a decent amount there. So restrict that down. At least 100 milligrams or less would be ideal for that point of time. 50 milligrams or less is great to do if you can do that, but it just depends on your size and stature. Any training that you might have to do those days as well. So consider your training these last few days too, in terms of dehydration and what your training plan might have been. So you're going to have to adjust accordingly, and if you're the type that needs to train all the way through the meet, maybe you shouldn't be cutting this kind of weight. Now, so we talked fluid, nutrition, looking at starch in carbohydrate intake this last week or so is definitely, for every gram of carbohydrate, you're going to hold 3 to 4 times its weight, or 3 to 4 grams in water. So you got to get rid of any excess carb, sugary type foods. And at least this last week, you should have really gotten it tightened up in your previous phases of just general diet cleanup. And any excess carbs, and especially if you're peaking and tapering here, your training volume is going down, so you won't need as much carbohydrate to fuel your training at this point in time. So you'll be able to survive off of a little less of that. And if it's an off day, cut it down. Earlier in the week, maybe you change it with a salad, more vegetable type intake, keep your salt in check and your carbohydrates in check at that point. So you're restricting water more and more there. So you're getting off all this water in these last few days. You might be very surprised how much you can actually get off. So hopefully that worked out for you. You don't have to take the next step. And some people would go that water restriction route. Some people would just say, screw it, I'm just going to use the sauna. So you can go both paths. In my worst cases, we'll tend to have to use both. So looking at the sauna now, it'd be a method of sweating your weight out and trying to make weight. And some people like that because they don't have to change anything they're doing too drastically, like we talked about, and they can just do that and lose whatever ounces to pounds they need to do in the last 24 to 48 hours, which is fine. So you choose your poison, see what works for you. Now, typically what I like to do for each person that is going to do this is on the Wednesday before the competition, do a test sauna run. So they know what it's like, they know what they're getting themselves into, they know how to work the sauna, they know how to get themselves through that time frame, how to tweak the temperature, things like that, whether they want to listen to headphones or not, or how much time it's going to take. So what this sauna test is to acclimate them to the process, but it's also to see how much weight they lose in 10 to 15 minutes. So it's a test to see how much water we can get off this individual in 10 to 15 minutes, and you want to document that. And so that way we know how much time we might have to budget for in those last 24 to 48 hours of how much time you're going to need in the sauna, and then we can map it out and know when we need to start doing this process so we don't run up to the last second and run out of time. So I like to start earlier so I can get that done. I don't feel baked and dry to a crisp going into the competition. So I'm definitely, if I'm weighing in and say Saturday at 10 a.m., I'm starting that pretty much 24 hours out if I'm in trouble and I need to get some weight off, because I'd rather go to sleep as close to weight as possible personally. Some people are okay with 1 to 2 pounds over. A kilo overweight for most people is pushing it. If you've been cutting weight, a kilo overweight is probably too much, and actually I'd go close to a pound to a half pound if you've had to dry yourself out, because you're not going to lose as much overnight at that point in time. If you haven't changed much to your diet and your process, and you've been eating and drinking normally and training normally, then I would expect to lose maybe 2 to 3 pounds, especially if that's what your trend is. So you can go to bed at night expecting that for the most part, but still track and document it. In terms of the sauna usage, starting at roughly 24 hours out at the latest, to where you're starting these doses of, say, 10, you might start long. You might go 20, 30 minutes at first, but you won't be able to sustain it too long. The longer you stay in there, the more it drains you mentally and physically. So I kind of like a method of doing short, choppy doses, just spread throughout a long period of time, and seeing how that goes so you don't have to overdo it there. So I might start with something like 15 to 20 minute bouts and go for as long as I can tolerate that, but then I start cutting it down and spend about a 10-minute bout. And so as you go in and out of the sauna, you're checking your weight and you're seeing where you're at. And sometimes, I might spend 15 minutes in there, and I might spend 15 to 30 minutes out of it just to recover and to get back in there. And so there's a number of ways that you can do to make that process work for you. Really, just all that matters is you can survive it, you don't have to overdo it, and you can get through it as stress-free as possible to make your weight. So if you can get yourself, if you've been cutting a lot of weight, if you get yourself to at least within about a half pound of weight the day before, then you're probably going to be pretty good for the most part. But get that as tight as possible. So preferably, like I said, I like to get as close to my body weight as possible right on the night before, so I can still eat some food and not be starving, and it allows me to get some fluid allowance to get some fluid in, so I'm not dying, because I usually will suck on and chew on a lot of ice throughout the night because I get really thirsty as I go there. So I kind of like to give myself a little slack there by getting at weight the night before I go to sleep, so about 12 hours out or so. If you don't go much closer than that, you're going to have a rough time, because you're not going to be sweating much more weight out, and you'll get to the point in the sauna, in the worst case, where you're not even sweating anymore, no matter how long you're sitting there. So those are the basic steps and strategies with that sauna. Then as you get out, some people like to dry themselves off to generate that sweat cycle over. Some people like to continue the sweat going and not dry themselves off between. See what works for you. I do know that when I do the hot shower method, which is the plan B option here. So let's say you get to, you definitely want to check and make sure your hotel has a sauna and you can find one before you go to the place you're traveling to, because the worst thing is that you're relying on this weight cut and you can't get to a reliable sauna. But the hot shower method is another way to do it. So there's dry heat in the sauna and there's wet heat in the hot shower, and that's basically hot boxing a bathroom where you get the smallest bathroom you can find, close the door, block the bottom of the door with a towel so you're not losing heat. You're going to crank the shower as high as possible, turn the water on, and you're going to fill that bathtub up with the hottest water you can stand, and you're going to close the curtain, and you're going to hotbox that basically and get it as hot as possible, and you're just going to immerse yourself as much as possible up to basically the head and neck. And you're going to sit in there, it's going to work a lot like a sauna, but it's wet heat, which some people tolerate better than actually the dry heat like a sauna. And it's deceiving at first, but it can work very effectively if you have the right system set up where you're not losing heat there. So sometimes I have to sit up and get my chest above just to tolerate it for much longer. Sometimes I can get myself submerged. It just depends on how hot the water is. You don't want to burn yourself in that water, basically. So I might go 10 minutes in there and get out for 10 minutes and walk around and weigh myself. And sometimes I don't dry myself off. I just let that sweat process continue. And I go back in for 10 minutes and then get out for 10 minutes and then go back and forth as long as possible. And that's something you can do easily in your hotel room. You watch TV in between. It's a little bit less stressful than having to go out in public and be in the sauna and feel like you're alienated and drying yourself to death there. So there's a different approach there, but I typically use the hot shower method for plan B just in case. And I like to test that method out as well as the sauna if I can, like I said, that Wednesday out to see where we're at and to see how much loss we'll get with each method. If you plan to do the hot shower method, you've got to test it out beforehand to see how it goes, because there's a learning curve with that one that you want to get through before you save it to the last second at the hotel. So hopefully that's just all you have to do. Worst case scenario, you got to cut all your hair off and shave your body to make weight. Hopefully you don't have to do that. Hopefully you didn't need any of this to make weight, and you had a well-rounded, rational diet to get there anyway, and it's a lot easier. So, so good luck with that. And again, this is entertainment purposes only. You shouldn't have to go to these means for any aspect for competition performance. If you don't have to, it will rob and zap your performance. The more water you lose, the more it's going to change your body composition and the way your joints sit, the way your muscles sit, and the way you perform as an athlete. So losing this is not a good thing necessarily. It may look good on paper, but you don't always perform as well. And just a couple percentage points in dehydration will affect the way your muscles fire, the way you feel, the way your joints feel. You're going to be stiffer, and your brain doesn't fire. You know, every single action in the body is dictated by fluid, and fluid is the medium of all chemical reactions. So the more dehydrated you are, the worse you're going to perform and react. So you don't want to dehydrate if you don't have to. So urge caution. See your doctor before you do this. Best of luck. And also with your scale, if you buy a new scale, make sure if you can check your scale to the meet scale as soon as you can. So you want to get there and be prepared for any fluctuations you might have in your scale versus the meet scale, and see if there's any allowance that you might have there, or if your scale's been wrong. Also realize that sometimes they have a weight check and scale at the competition and an actual official scale, and they're not always lined up to be the same weight, so you got to verify that. And sometimes they'll put a sign up that says this scale is a half pound off from the other scale. So make sure you work out those variables.